Join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approve agenda. We need to amend that. We're going to remove D from the consent agenda. So we need to put it under old business. Put it under old business. So we need to approve the agenda with D being under old business. So we need to amend it.
Move to approve with the change as requested.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Public comments? Consent agenda? No, I'm just gonna say, hey, last week, I said Josh instead of Jade,
Oh, okay.
and it's Jade. So
Okay.
we just need, for the record, I need to change it to Jade.
Okay. All right. Move to approve a consent agenda with changing the airport commission appointment to Jade Batterson.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Old business, we'll just go ahead and do D first. The property at 206 West Walnut, we got the closing statement. The dollar amount is $7,445.44. There's a couple legal matters yet that need to be, we want to make sure with administratives, look at it and make sure that everything is as it's supposed to be. There's a couple legal things that we need to make sure get cleared up before we actually close.
Outstanding judgments.
It's outstanding judgments on a couple things. So
Okay.
with that, we just need to approve that dollar amount. So when all that's cleared and we get ready to close, we can go ahead and write the check.
Move to approve.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Update by HR Green and request for direction regarding design of wastewater treatment plant. You have the floor.
Thank you. Good to see you all again. Chris will work diligently here to get the presentation out. I put together a few slides, but this is not intended to be me standing here and just speaking. So if you guys have questions about anything, feel free to ask as we go. I'm sure questions will come up, but what the goal of this is to give you an idea of what types of alternatives we looked at, what types of decisions we've kind of looked at, and where we're going with the recommendation. Then to kind of get a feel of what you guys think, if we're on the right track, if that's the direction you want to go. And then we'll take the report, which I think you all got kind of a preliminary draft. There's been some significant changes that have occurred as late as 4 o'clock today. We got a wastewater allocation to the Fox River. And so I've updated some numbers in this presentation that are not in the plan you have. So we'll get those changes made to the plan, incorporate any comments or clarifications that you guys want in there, and then we'll send that back to you guys for approval to submit. The facility plan is, I think, step 2 on the compliance schedule of things, and that's the one thing right now that's way overdue from being submitted. So once we get that submitted to the state, we can start submitting the funding applications to get planning and design loan money, get yourselves on the IUPs, then you're eligible to start applying for CDBG grants and that sort of stuff as we move forward. So this is just kind of the first step in the process, and I would call it the first step in approval to get a feel for it, and then we'll give you the report. And if you like the report, you can approve that, and then we can submit it. So that's kind of where that's at. So these are kind of the factors that we considered when looking at the system as a whole. We've got 2 components right now that we're working on, the wastewater plant and the sanitary sewer system. The approach that we presented during the interview phase when we were selected on this was to handle the treatment plant first and get the environmental issues, the environmental quality issues and water quality up to par so that we're discharging on a daily basis, quality effluent that's meeting discharge limits. Then we're gonna go back and look at the sewer. Well, we're gonna continue to look at that, but then we'll go back and address those sewer concerns and try to get the I&I reduced. And that can be a long, painstaking process anyways, so we didn't wanna start there and end up years and years down the road without having anything really done. And the cost of everything just goes up in the meantime. So
Matt,
those we can phase.
could you talk about I&I just a little bit so that there's audiences watching?
Sorry, yep. I&I and the issues here, factors to consider, the first one is, can I&I be addressed effectively? I&I is inflow and infiltration into the sewer system. So inflow is considered, if it rains, water's running down the street, finds the storm sewer is directly connected into the sanitary sewer and intake, and then that water directly goes into the sanitary sewer and onto the treatment plant. Inflow can also run through manhole lids, find cracks up in the surface of the road and end up down in a manhole and into the sewer. It's kind of a direct connection. Other sources of inflow are house sump pumps, service connection lines that are old and have a lot of leaks into them, leads to water falling on the ground, finding cracks and crevices, going directly into the pipe. So if you're looking at a graph of flow and your flow is pretty steady and then all of a sudden it rains and it shoots right up and right back down, that's inflow. The other I is infiltration. So what infiltration is water seeping into the ground. The groundwater kind of comes up and the sewers and manholes act like tile systems. So then that water seeps into the pipe and that can be a prolonged thing. So if your flow is going along nice and flat and all of a sudden you see this real slow rise and a real slow drop, that would indicate infiltration into the sewer system because that water's coming up, seeping in, not just flowing immediately in. So those are the two forms of infiltration and inflow into the sewer system. Basically clean water getting into the sewer that then goes down to the treatment plant, costs energy to treat it, run it through the plant, and then out. So we want to get that out of there. It just causes more problems with your treatment system because your flows start to exceed. So right now, on a dry day, you're running anywhere from 500,000 to maybe 600,000-700,000 gallons a day to your treatment plant. And then when it rains, you shoot up to 2 or 3 million gallons going to the treatment plant. So all that has to go through all the processes and pumps and get aerated and go through the lagoons, and it eats up capacity. So
we do have an issue with that.
yes, yep, there is an inflow and infiltration issue. And the bigger issue for you that falls in the compliance orders that you have from EPA and DNR is you have SSOs, which are sanitary sewer overflows. So you get a lot of inflow into the sewer and then it finds a spot that it can no longer be conveyed because there's just too much water, and then it flows out a manhole and onto the ground, and then that water's running over the surface. And that's where we have an overflow, and that's a public health concern because there is some untreated wastewater that ends up in that water when it comes up and overflows. Now it's very, very dilute. So from an environmental standpoint, that those types of events happen, on average 5 to 10 times a year, probably depending on intensity of rainfall events. So those are the days where we have a pollutant issue of very dilute pollutants going down, get down the roads, into streams, into ditches, that sort of thing. Whereas at the treatment plant, when we have exceedances out there, TSS and BOD and ammonia, those are more prolific. So to handle those first and then go back and get these 5 to 10 events over time as we move forward is the approach that we've taken. And I talked to the DNR about that approach, and they said that sounds good. That's not the way a lot of towns do it, but a lot of towns try to handle all this I&I, and they spend a lot of money doing it. And then they don't have anything left to actually improve their treatment system. So they haven't actually made a whole lot of progress in 10 or 15 years of moving forward. And then they've depleted reserves and everything else. So they have no money and no funding to do anything. So that's kind of the approach that we've taken with this at this point. So that's one of the things that we're looking at and how that can be addressed and how it can be addressed cost effectively. One of the things that we're working on right now is developing kind of a public outreach program where we'll come down here, we'll present, we'll have newsletters that'll get mailed out. We'll have a couple of public meetings where we invite the public to come in and talk about things that they can do at their houses to help reduce some of that inflow, whether it be sump pumps, roof drains, very old services, area drains out in their yards. If there are things that they're aware of that they can start to take out of the system, that will take a chunk of the flow out of the system and help to reduce those SSOs when they occur. So that's kind of the first step, is if things can be done on a voluntary basis without costing the city those dollars, then it saves the residents on a whole dollars in the end, because you don't have to increase capacity of all your sewers and build new lift stations and everything else to handle those flows.
Raise their taxes.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of the target there, and we're working on that, and should have something after the first of the year, probably to start coming down and doing a public outreach program. Can existing treatment be reused? And this is a real big one to look at. The lagoons out there, they're bought and paid for infrastructure, so we want to utilize whatever they've got in them for treatment. We want to try to use that and keep that there. We have a couple of options with new systems where we abandon the lagoons, and you can see how those costs kind of come out here towards the end. I'll throw the costs up there. We look at setback, project time frame, which is basically your compliance schedule, other regulatory requirements for all the contaminants that we have to look at, ammonia, total nitrogen, total phosphorus. Those aren't limits now, but they may be in the future, so that's something to consider. Bacteria, dissolved oxygen is another one that's on there. Those are the types of things that we're looking at. And then the most important thing, as far as I think from your perspective, would be the capital cost, and then life cycle cost also. Does it cost way too much a year to run this thing, even though it's really, really cheap? So those are a lot of factors that we considered, and that there's a lot more. That's kind of what drives that facility plan that you've seen once already. So the treatment alternatives that we have looked at, we looked at running a pipe to the Fox River. This alternative, cost-wise, was not too bad, but you still had dissolved oxygen and disinfection. So we had to look at adding that no matter what we did. And then we got the waste load allocation for the river today at 4 o'clock, and you still have to build a full treatment plant because the limits are this much better than what the limits are to discharge into the creek that you're already discharging to. So when you see the numbers later on, you'll see that the Fox River, we got to run, $5 million worth of pipe, and then we still got to build a full treatment system. So we've kind of eliminated that as of a couple hours ago. Lemtech biological treatment process, a submerged detached growth reactor, recycler system, a revolving algal biofilm, an RAV system, and an Aeromod Sequox, which is basically a package plant. Would completely replace what you have and just put in a package plant. So of those technologies, I'll just run through these real quick, show you kind of a picture of what these look like, and give you an idea of what we looked at. Pipe to the Fox River would just run basically along the creek, so it would parallel where the water's going right now. So we figured it'd flow by gravity down to the same discharge point into the Fox River. I won't spend a whole lot more time on that one. The Lemtech biological treatment process, this basically covers your lagoons with ammonia, which is the toughest one right now in your limits, the toughest one to deal with, because lagoons treat ammonia really well about 9 or 10 months out of the year, and then there's 2 months where it doesn't. So everything has to be designed and factored around that ammonia removal for 2 months out of the year. So the way that we do that with this type of system is you keep the water warm enough that it doesn't feel the effect of the cold weather. So you cover them, you insulate them, and you add a whole lot more air to it. And then at the end of this, there's a little polishing reactor, which is basically a plastic media that grows bugs on it to polish anything that might break through. This type of system is very effective. We've designed a couple of them. This is what it looks like. So you can tell it's very well insulated because there's snow sitting on top of it. You can walk right out there. The problems that we see with it are when you get high winds, those covers will have a tendency to lift up, and when they lift up and rip off, then you have to replace them, and you spend the same money it cost you the first place to put it on. So that's one of the issues with them. Another one of the issues is there's not a whole lot of expandability in that. If you do get new limits in the future, you're not going to meet them with this type of system, and you'll have to add supplemental treatment units onto that. So this system, from a cost standpoint, is right in the running with our recommended alternative, which ends up being the Sager system in this. But these two are very, very similar in cost. These, you can kind of see here, the aerial is a little bit grainy. This is the first lagoon cell, and this is the second lagoon cell. So this limit system there would be the covers right here, build a berm and either have this as EQ or you can fill that in and use it later. But those lagoons would be much smaller than what you have now. They'd be covered, insulated, and aerated, a polishing reactor, and then out to effluent. So that's how it would lay out on your site. The Sager, I think I've talked about this before, but it's basically a big box of rocks under the ground. Those rocks grow bacteria on them. So the lemna keeps the water warm. The Sager system grows the bacteria on a rock, so it's not floating through the lagoon. So when you're treating wastewater in a lagoon, the water flows through and the bugs flow through. So your hydraulic retention time, which is the water, and your solids retention time, which are the bugs, are equal. So the water and the bugs move through at the same time. So as the temperature gets colder, the bugs start to slow down and the water pushes further and further through before it gets actually treated. And then what happens is you get ammonia breaking through out the back end of it because bugs prefer BOD, which is the organic matter, and that's their chocolate milk or chocolate ice cream of the world, and then the ammonia is their Brussels sprouts. So they're gonna eat the chocolate ice cream first and then the Brussels sprouts. So as the water temperature gets cold, the ammonia comes out the back end. This process, you grow the bugs on a rock so that your solids retention time, that SRT, is very, very high. So those bugs are there for a long, long time. So they stay viable, and then as that ammonia comes by, they're forced to eat it because the lagoons have already gotten rid of all the BOD and organic matters. So the lemna system heats the water and keeps it warm so the bugs stay active. The Sager system keeps the bugs in one place so that they continue to eat as that ammonia comes by. And this is what that looks like. You feed from both sides, flow to the middle, the bottom is the discharge pipe, and it pulls out. So the rocks create both a filter and a place for those happy little bugs to grow. This is a system that we put in Walker. This was the first one in the state that went in. We took what was 2 large lagoon cells and we put aeration and built some berms in here and then built the Sagers right in that one lagoon cell. So you can see the footprint shrinkage there. This is the same type of approach that we would be looking at here. The second lagoon cell here, the Sagers would go into the second lagoon cell. We take the first one, we build a couple of berms in there, add aeration into that, quiescent cell here to kind of settle out, and then go into the Sager and then on to discharge. All this space down here could be used either as flow equalization. If we continue to have higher peaks, I was talking this afternoon with one of our engineers about these lagoons are about 15 feet deep, keeping about a 10-foot water level in there and having an effluent pipe size to restrict flow coming out so that we could only get our design flow out of the cell. And then when we had a high flow event, that water level would go up. So we'd store it until it got to a high point where we didn't want to store it anymore because we're going to overflow. And then that overflow would go down into this lagoon, which we could then tie into the lift station where it's either a controlled valve or another small orifice type pipe that would slowly drain that back and recycle it back around into the system. So that's one of the things that we're looking at doing with this in order to control those peak flow events is really limit the amount of flow that's going into this treatment process. So that's a preliminary draft of how that might look.
That's your recommended.
That's our recommended alternative. Yep. The Aeromod plant is a mechanical treatment plant. It's just like what you see in the big cities where you've got an activated sludge, which is a whole bunch of bugs boiling around in water. It's a very chocolatey looking, earthy smelling type reactor. And yeah,
Earthly smell.
Yeah.
Nice.
And there's lots of air, there's lots of moving parts in that. You have recycle that's going around all the time, very good at treatment, very prone to upset. If you have, the problem with these in small towns is number one, high flows, you gotta have equalization, so we have to keep equalization in front of this. And number two is shock loads. There's not enough flow to dilute a shock load like you might see from one of your industrial contributors in town where you don't know for sure what's coming all the time. And if there's something that upsets this and you lose it, you have to go to another plant somewhere to get a solution to reseed the plant, and it takes time to bring that biology back. So that's one of the reasons that this is sometimes not the best solution, but it is a very small footprint. for this type of system, and it does provide very good levels of treatment, and it also can do nutrient removal. If you get into total nitrogen and total phosphorus, this is a very modular system, and they can add on different types of tanks, whether they be aerobic with aeration or anaerobic with no aeration. You can add different sequences of those and rotate the water around and recycle it and actually get your treatment limits and nutrient removal all done biologically, which is, bugs work for free, so it's the cheapest way to do it rather than adding chemicals or other filtering mechanisms or anything like that. This is kind of just a graphic of what those reactions look like. The water comes in, goes through aeration, there's digesters in there to digest the sludge. Now with this type of process, you have sludge that has to be removed and processed and land applied or dried and taken care of on a continuing basis. Unlike the lagoons where you get 20 years before you got to deal with the sludge, in this you don't have that much time. So you have to deal with that fairly regularly. This is what it looks like. This is a system, I think, down in Corning. So we have a building with blowers in there, and you can see there's aerated tanks in here and non-aerated tanks, but fairly small footprint. The rotating algal bioreactor, this is a new technology that involves growing algae on belts that go around and around, and they get down into the water, and they grow algae and biology on a belt, and then they scrape that off periodically and take that algae and that they sell it, and they can either make algae fertilizer out of that or plastics. There's a resale market for the algae that comes off of the system. This gets located in a greenhouse. It's very good because it's algae and because it's a plant. It uptakes the ammonia directly and phosphorus also. So it does do good nutrient removal according to their preliminary testing and piloting on that. This actually goes in before the lagoons. The algae prefers ammonia. When ammonia gets into a lagoon, the bacteria in there break it down into nitrite. The algae prefers to go directly, take the ammonia out first, and then you go into the lagoons where you get the BOD treatment and other organic matter removals. So there are no full-scale plants in Iowa to date of this. They do have a demonstration unit that's going into Slater anytime now. I think they just got approval to put that in, so there will be one actually active in Iowa. I've had lots of discussions with these folks. They've been very willing to work with us. They actually came back and gave us a big discount on their system to try to get kind of an early adopter discount, is what they called it, of almost $1 million that they were willing to contribute to the project to try to get it in. I've had a lot of discussions with the DNR about the approval. They've been given permission to put in a demonstration, but they do not have a design that's gone through DNR approval yet. And so the DNR is not comfortable with some of the processes and things that they have said they're going to do. So there are some big uncertainties from our standpoint with this system. I'd love to recommend it. I'd love to put it in because it would be a real landmark project, probably more so for HR Green than it would be for the city of Bloomfield. But it's a really good technology, and we've really worked and looked hard at this. And I just don't see it as being viable for you guys at this time. But I'd be happy to answer any more questions you might have on that. I know Chris and Danny have had a lot of discussions with me, and we've talked through this a lot, looking at this technology. But this is kind of, again, schematically how it works. Big belt rotates around and algae grows on it. Located in a greenhouse, you can see that. These are the belts. A lot of moving parts. We went to the manufacturer of this and asked them to give us a service agreement cost, because we said, when these belts need to be replaced in 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it is, there's 7 modules, and each one of these modules has that many belts in it. So those all have to be taken off and re-put on because the belts will start to fail. So they gave us a cost for that, so we incorporated that into the operating cost for that on an annual basis, and they said they'd be willing to come down and do all that work for you. So if we were to go this route, I would highly recommend getting a service agreement with those guys to do that.
What's their timeline, do they think, of getting the DNR approval?
That it'll be a couple of years. I don't have any doubts right now that they will get approved. One of the big things, and I can explain this to you guys now too. One of the big things that I have a huge concern about with this type of system is it's located in front of the lagoons. So when you treat water and then discharge it into a lagoon, now the actual limits will get tighter now because you're going to a different type of treatment system, so your limits will actually go down. So you're not at the same lagoon limits that you had before. When that happens, when you go into a lagoon, you introduce environmental factors. Think about geese, algae growth, sludge turnover in the spring, fall. When that stuff starts to turn up off the bottom, you have the potential for rebound of contaminants as stuff breaks down and re-releases into the water. You have the potential for other solids to blow in there, geese to impact your discharge, that sort of stuff, and algae growth, which is a big one. And we know you have a problem out there with algae growth now. So if you treat it with algae in the beginning and you have a great environment to grow algae, and then you discharge it into a pond, you've got algae that's also going out into that pond, and then you give it a chance to grow and flourish again if it so desires, and then discharge, and you have nothing to protect you on the end. The one thing, I'm a huge advocate for Sager, but I give everybody their time to take a look at them. But the one thing that I cannot get anybody else to accomplish that Sager does is they're a big rock filter after the lagoon. If you have anything that breaks through that lagoon, it's captured in the Sager, and the effluent out of the Sager process is consistent year round. I demonstrated with a flat line earlier for average flow. The effluent out of the Sager is a flat line year round. They don't have little peaks and valleys that occur in the spring and in the fall when conditions start changing. And that's what I've seen out of these other systems. They might not ever exceed effluent limits, so they're fine, but there's always that ebb and that flow. And so when you look at the quality of the effluent, the Sager effluent that I've seen is like that all the time. And out of the other systems, you'll get a green tint to it. When there's a little bit of algae in there, yeah, it passes limits, but it doesn't look like that. And that's one of the
We can drink it.
I wouldn't. There's a few things you probably can't see in there, but it's pretty doggone close at times to being of drinking water quality. It's probably better drinking water than some places around the world. So you're probably in good shape there. But this system, the way that it would lay out is you would have the greenhouse about that big, and then you'd still use these other lagoon cells. And whether this would be their final configuration or not, I don't know. One of the things that we would have to do with this is cover the lagoons after we discharge from the system. And that's per the DNR recommendation, because that would prevent algae growth and anything else from getting in that lagoon. So it would protect you, it would allow the lagoon to work as a
Cover being a
just like I showed you with those laminate covers, a floating
cover.
probably wouldn't have to necessarily be insulated, but it would have to prevent sunlight penetration. They have bird balls that you could put on them too, little wiffle balls that cover the complete surface and don't allow light penetration. They use those a lot out in California, I think, to cover their reservoirs to keep the birds and stuff out of it.
Evaporation too.
Yep, evaporation too.
So if you did this system, since it's not DNR approved yet, and you did it, can you still do it? As long as you meet
they've gotten far enough along in the process that when I went through with the Sager before it was approved, I took that to the DNR and I said, here's new technology. The manufacturer had already been talking to the DNR, so they were aware of it. Very similar situation. They know what's going on. They've kind of vetted it, but they haven't done approval because they don't have a design. They can't approve something until somebody submits a design and says, this is what I want to do. So when somebody comes to them and submits a design, they'll be able to compare it to their design standards. They'll go line by line through the regulations and make sure everything meets what it needs to. Reliability, is it going to work continually? Redundancy, if one unit goes down, you have another unit there that will pick up the slack and not allow you to violate effluent limits. And all the other design parameters in there, is it sized properly for temperature? Do you have enough surface area on your belts? All those things they would look at. Once they come to that approval, then they would issue the permit. With the Sager system, it took about 2 years from the time I submitted the design till I got the construction permit for that system. So I would imagine that same type of time frame here from a design going in, since they have a demonstration unit here in Iowa, it might be a little shorter time period, maybe a year and a half, but I would guess if I submitted tomorrow, we'd be talking next December to the DNR about getting an approval for it.
Matt, the guys told me about the manufacturer's incentive of $1 million. But is it my understanding that $1 million would just bring the cost down to be competitive with the Sager system, not that it would be any cheaper?
No, and I'll show you that here in a second, because that cost, that $1 million actually brought them down really close. And it would have been a decision. And tonight would have been a night where you would have walked out of here thinking, which way do we want to go? Do we want to be kind of cutting edge, innovative, reuse this algae, resell it, and bring in a revenue stream from that? Or do we want to go the safe and proven route for something that's going to produce good quality effluent, but there's not really a side benefit to the city out of that? I thought that's where we're going to be. After I talked to the DNR and they started voicing some of their concerns about what they were going to end up requiring, like covers and everything else, the costs started to go back up. Solids handling, now you have algae that you have to deal with on a monthly basis. What do you do with that? Well, you can't just store it in a dumpster. You have to actually be able to dry it, store it, contain the water that drains out of it, recycle that back into the treatment works. So there's a lot of contingency items in there that we are unsure about that approval. So I had to bump my contingency back up on them a little bit, and that brought the cost back up to where they're really not, they're not competitive now, even with that $1 million discount. So here's the cost comparison. Here's where things basically fall out. The discharge to the Fox River is at $13.5 million capital cost. The controlled discharge lagoon, I didn't talk about this, but this is a question that the public often asks. Well, why don't we just store the water and go spray it on a farm field somewhere? So yeah, you can do that, but the cost is about the same as running a pipe up to the Fox River and building a treatment plant, $13.6 million, because you need acres and acres and acres of lagoon volume to store all that flow for a 180-day period throughout the year in order to then spray irrigate it. Existing lagoons in Sager, that's $5.7 million right now. That is the recommended alternative. So that 5.7 is kind of the basis for where we're going. Next one here, existing lagoons and the Sager with total nitrogen and total phosphorus removal. This is something that, as you may be aware, may come up. We may have total nitrogen and total phosphorus limits down the road. Once we build this system, it won't be for 10 years. You get a 10-year, freeze, basically. So it for sure wouldn't be for at least 10 years that comes about.
Is that something that could be added?
Yes, and that's why I put it with total nitrogen and total phosphorus removal. So the cost of that to add those two things it goes up to $7.5 million. So it's $1.5 million to add that stuff to the system. And then the operational costs then go up with that, because now you're removing those nutrients. But it's higher with everything else, like the mechanical plant, $108,000 versus $169,000 a year to operate. So that's giving you an idea that the cost goes way, way up when we start looking at nutrients, just on an operational basis. The existing lagoons in the Limna system, $5.8 million. You can see very, very close on both that capital cost, and then the annual O&M cost is similar. The Limna system is a little bit higher, which is what kind of pushes them up. So 7.3 20-year life cycle versus 7.7 20-year life cycle for that Limna system. So they're very close. But from a treatment standpoint and an ease of operation standpoint and a reliability standpoint, some of those issues that I talked about, I think the Sager kind of hands down wins when you're looking at two kind of equals. That RAB system, the rotating algal biofilm process, $8.5 million. So we're looking at almost a $3 million gap there in cost.
That, like with the dewatering, everything that would take.
Yep, that's their cost as they gave it to us originally. The next line here is with a $900,000 discount that they gave us. They're giving basically 2 modules for free out of the 7 that you need. That brought it down to $7.5 million when you look at contingency and in percentages in there, so cut about $1.2 million off of it. So 7.3 as opposed to 5.7, there's still about $1.5 million off of the cost of the Sager system.
So in 10 years, you have to do the total nitrogen and total phosphate removal. Is any of the other systems able to do that?
The package plant down here will. And that's $7 million, so it's about $1 million higher. It's similar to what the RAB system is. The annual cost of that is a little bit lower than what the annual cost for
Is the RAB system able to do that?
they say.
Matt?
Yeah.
So if you do the total nitrogen and phosphate with the Sagar, they're all three about equal.
Mhm. Yep.
It's not a requirement now, and we're not doing that, right? I mean,
That is correct.
Yeah.
But to give, anticipating
Yeah.
this question, we wanted to look to see where this
Yeah,
came
no,
out,
it's
because
not-
if you
Well, I mean,
don't-
it's, if you know you're not gonna have to do it for 10 years,
But even that 10 years, you can-
period, if you know you're gonna have to after that, you're gonna wanna try to build in that 10-year period to have it. Where you can do it and have it build in so that at the end of the 10 years, you've got it.
You can add that after 10 years easily.
I think there's two issues here. First of all, if you look at what's gonna happen 10 years from now, are we still gonna be required to do it? Because if you look at it from a sewage treatment standpoint, what would change in our environment to cause that? Probably something overtly significant that it'd probably tell the industrial agency that you're gonna help pay for it. Otherwise, we have low volumes here, we have low growth here, we have not significant swings in the change of our environment. The reason why some of this stuff is happening is that there are new regulations and higher stresses as far as these regulations are concerned, which we've kind of gone through as a country over the last 20 years or so. I don't think that we can foresee a whole lot more coming down the road. There are other phosphorus limitations, though, that, right now we don't have to control for because we don't produce that much. And that's what would trigger this, is that if we create more phosphorus. But right now, our environment would suggest that we don't have that, which is, from my perspective, kind of unique. Of course, it also shows how small we are because most of these guys deal with phosphorus.
Does most of our issues with that come from that one facility?
With phosphorus?
No.
It's everywhere. It's everywhere.
But I know Southern Iowa Container causes us quite a bit of our problems with some of our limits.
Yeah, that's a BOD thing, right?
BOD solids.
Solids, yeah.
That's what it appears to be. I had some discussions with Jeremy today about some additional sampling on two particular facilities, just to kind of spot check and see what types of loads are coming in, so we can try to quantify what we've seen historically for flow and load coming into the facility, if we can kind of capture what that is. We've also had the salt solution analyzed, and we're taking a look at the total oxygen demand, which is what we're concerned about, out of that solution too, to see if there's some contribution coming from that. My guess is, and what I've seen, there are some trends, but they're not consistent trends. So I think there's multiple sources that are contributing to that. So, but we're trying to get a little better handle on what's going on there.
So what you're saying is basically you think the best fit for us is also the cheapest one?
Yes.
Nice for a change.
We better fire him.
Doggone it.
You can't win.
I recommend we dig a pipe into the Fox River, because then I can do a pipe
You're hired.
and a treatment system. I have a meeting next week. I'm going to talk to some legislators about small community issues and the affordability and the lack of acceptance of innovation in treatment technologies and some of the redundancy requirements are tops on my agenda. I am going as on behalf of IOEA to sit at the table there and talk to a few of them about these issues. It's gaining a lot of traction and we're making strides forward. They've asked us to help review design standards as an association separate from HR Green. So that's at least a step in the right direction towards us trying to get the design standards modified to allow a PE stamp to actually mean something. Because right now I can sign a set of drawings and take full risk for it, and it goes to the DNR and they can change everything before they approve it, and it's not my design anymore. And I don't think that's right. I think they should let us take that risk and they should do their job of protecting the environment and give us a chance to work with innovation and everything else. And at this point, what that means for you is that there is about a 10% savings on the Sager system that we're fighting for right now. 10% cost, because if we could shrink the system slightly but reconfigure it to save some cost on it. It's allowed in many other states in the country. I won't say every other state, but it's allowed in many other states and it's been effective. So why we can't do it here in Iowa, I don't know. But that's one of the things that I'll be bringing up and trying to get. So hopefully that'll happen quickly enough that we can implement that change as part of this project. But that's the good news out of this, is that cost could potentially come down a little bit on that system if we can get that pushed through timely. But no promises.
You got a question? I do.
Yeah.
Matt, when we have looked at Sagar's previously, some of the cost estimates that we had were substantially higher than this. And it seems, I think I recall a conversation where you talked about different sizing already that's been addressed, right? And could you talk to that just a little bit to let the council know what's been done so far?
This, and I may have given you a little bit of my background previously, but I worked for a very small 5-person firm when I started, and we grew up in Minnesota. We designed constructed wetlands, which are basically a bathtub full of rock that we treated wastewater from small cluster developments, little tiny towns, micro cities almost. And we developed that technology, and the guy that hired me and the vice president of the company got a patent that eventually turned into what is the Sager. And so I kind of helped with the innovation in the design and the development of what eventually became that. Well, he sold that patent to a company up in Canada, and I left that firm. They went belly up when the 2007-8 housing crash. There was no more cluster developments and no small towns were spending money, so they got bought out. But that patent went to Canada, and that's what became the Sager process. So I have a lot of history with it, but no attachment or affiliation to anything anymore. When we designed the first one and got that one approved here in Iowa, we got it approved with very, very tough design standards. And we got that system in, and we started doing a bunch of sampling, and I worked with a professor down at the University of Iowa, and he had some grad students get out there and do some sampling, and they drilled, augured holes in there and put in monitoring wells and actually tested water going through the cells. Well, as they did that, and we gathered all this data, and I had a wonderful operator there that was willing to take additional samples every week and monitor. He spent a lot of time doing that. With the data that we gathered off that system, we went back to the state and got about a 40% reduction in the sizing of the Sager system. So that was the first big change that happened. So we got that done. And I'm not done yet, so I'm hoping we keep the same volume of rock in the system, so we'll grow the same amount of biology, but I just want to change the configuration because they are very reliable. It's not like you have to take a unit offline to do any maintenance on it. They just work all the time, and if you do, you do it in the summertime because your lagoons are doing all the work then anyway. So you've got these units that you could take offline for 3 or 4 months and not affect your treatment effluent quality at all. So we're trying to take, I'm trying to take that next step to get the system just a little bit cheaper even yet, because it's not necessary to size it like they have. So the initial estimates would have been about 30 to 40% higher than what these estimates are now based on that big size reduction. And we did one in Kyoto and one in Keystone that are both operating right now, both meeting limits consistently all through their first winter of operation. And we've got a couple more that are slated to go in with that same design. 3 of them, I think, next year.
Of the Sagar.
What is it about discharging straight to the Fox River that would make them happy? As opposed to going into the stream that goes to the Fox?
Because you're putting it in a bigger volume of water.
Dilution is a big deal with ammonia because it's a concentration issue with ammonia that makes it toxic. So if you have more flow, like if you discharge into the Iowa River or the Cedar River or the Mississippi River, you don't even have to worry about ammonia because it's so dilute when it goes in there and it dissipates in the environment anyway.
So they're just concerned about that stretch of creek from the
Yeah.
treatment plant to the Fox?
Yeah, so when you go into a very small stream, basically what the water quality standards say is you have to treat that as if it has zero flow at any time during the year, you basically have to say the wastewater discharge is the stream and the discharge has to meet water quality standards.
Just curious.
Yeah, that's why. Good question though.
So if you had twice as much water running through the stream, you'd be better off as well.
How do I go back?
If it had rained any at all the last 2 years, our numbers wouldn't be bad.
Maybe we can redirect our storm sewers there to increase the flow.
If we have
Which did you want to see?
The overview there, is that the Sagar?
Yep.
That's here, that one that you got designed for here?
This is for Walker. The one that I have designed, we have designed for here, shows them right. Those are the would be 4 Sager cells.
So the angled lines is all future.
That is, future
Either
expansion.
future expansion or
Overflow.
overflow to return back in for like for infiltration.
Yep. Initially, I would propose that to be for overflow. And then as the sewer issues get addressed and you don't have overflows anymore, then that could be filled in, used for future expansion. The amount of volume that you have out here in these lagoons, is way more than what's actually needed by the design standards. We could actually shrink these up even more, but if we did that, we'd just have more dirt to haul in and work around. So
Since
we're
we got
keeping the lagoons
This
big.
will use it.
You have, that'll leave you expansion room and everything else, but it will cut down, cutting that footprint in half will cut down dramatically on the amount of algae.
Is that the first or second lagoon, the way that picture?
This is the first lagoon, the new
Okay.
maintenance shed is right here, basically. So that's the road in, the meat locker guys are right up there.
So you would still have that first lagoon for retention volume?
The first one, this would be the aerated portion. So we'd put in a couple of dikes across that first lagoon to separate that into 3.
But that's where you said you're gonna drop the level down to 10 feet, allow for
Yeah.
expansion. in
We
case
talked
of
about
big
that today. I
influx.
have no idea if
Yeah.
that will actually work or not. I haven't done the volume calculations or anything else, but
If you can get that cost down another 15%, we can use that number for I&I, right?
there you go.
Now, is a large part of the cost of this, is it a lot of the dirt work or is it more towards the Sager?
It's both. The thing about the Sager process, those guys aren't getting rich on selling their equipment because there's not much of it. They have a liner, they have some air tubing, they sell their blowers and their aeration system as a package. But the big cost is right in these 4 boxes. It's in 6 to 8 feet of rock filling up those boxes. So that's
How big
actually
are
the
they?
biggest cost.
No idea from scale there, but 20 by 80 or, I mean, any idea how big they are?
Probably 40 by 100 maybe.
What kind of boxes are they?
They're plywood. They're just an untreated plywood box. That box is built and you put a liner, a swimming pool liner essentially in it. 30 mil, 60 mil HDPE liner, fairly rigid. And then you fill it up with rock. And then over time that wood just rots away. But all that is a form to hold the liner up until you get the rock in and the backfill up against it. Kind of got to backfill at the same time on each side of it. So if you put all the rock in, the walls will collapse out. And if you fill on the outside of them, they'll cave in. So you got to fill them at the same time going up. And then once that's all in there, then that wood just rots away and you've got a lined rock box.
What kind of rock?
It's about 1.5 inches.
Limestone? Is it some,
Call it septic rock.
okay. Not like
They can
lava
use
rock or
limestone. There is a hardness test that they
Yeah.
do on it
Yeah.
to make sure that it's not, you can't use like sandstone in it that will disintegrate.
River rock?
Yeah,
We don't have
River
to
Rock.
get it from New York.
River Rock is perfect.
We can get it probably fairly local.
If you've got a local quarry that's close, that will drive your cost down. You could get probably 5% off your cost if you've got local rock. That's good talk.
Oh, River Rock's good limestone.
Down.
Limestone break down for River Rock.
We've over time, we got burnt a little bit in Kyoto, which would be up north of ways. We used the number that we had used in our rock estimate for a little more local than Cedar Rapids, where there's a couple of bigger quarries up there, and they ended up not being able to find rock within 50 miles. So they had a lot of trucking, and our estimate ended up being about $300,000 off on that project. Yeah,
We do have some
So
pretty
we-
cheap dirt contractors around here.
that's good. We bid another project a week later, same exact project, same exact size, and we were $100,000 high because the rock was closer, and that was the only difference in the two projects. So.
No, I wasn't talking about me, I was talking about somebody else.
Get what you pay.
So I do have, the one last slide that I did have here that I should have advanced to was this comparison matrix. And this is one of the things that we use to look at not only the economic, the first three there are related to cost, but ease of operation, treatment capability, expansion capability, and proven technology. And that, all those factors kind of lean towards the Sager system as being the most favorable, the lowest score there, one being the best on all those, like all. The Aeromod plant does provide a little better quality effluent typically. So I had to give that a little better score on that one. And it's smaller, so it expands easily. This system, the Sager system, we have all that room. If we need to expand and add on, we can. The way that I'm looking at the lagoons, if we do operate them at a lower water level, if we get that I&I under control in the near future, then you could actually fill those lagoons back up, that 2 feet that I was holding it down, and get automatic expansion of your lagoons by several million gallons, which would up your treatment capability in lagoons also. So we kind of have that. If we can get a handle on some of the excess spike loads that are coming into the plant, right now we're at about, I think 10% is what we estimated, due to the increase in loading, average loading that we have to use to account for some of those spikes. So if we design it and build it now with that 10% in there, if we get it out, you have 10% growth, right? Day one when we find that and get it out of there. Otherwise, your size to handle those if they periodically happen, if we don't figure it out right away, or we think we have it and we really don't, and it's some other source that's coming in at some other time, then we have that flexibility to be able to treat it also. So that's my recommendation, is to not waste a lot of time and effort going after it with a very intense, very focused effort right now, and maybe finding it and maybe not, but to do some sampling and see if we can track it down and see if we can get under control. And if we do, while this is going through the design and approval process, we can modify the report, we can modify the design, and we can modify the cost in the right direction.
So what would be the timetable on getting started on something like that?
If you really wanted to and you had the money all in place, we could probably get you going sometime next summer with breaking ground and building. I don't think we want to move forward quite that fast. If you do, we sure can push to get that done. But we're probably looking at getting this approved. We got an anti-DAG that still has to go out on public notice, but we want to make sure we got the right recommendation in there. That goes out on a 30-day public notice, then it's a 30 to 90-day approval process after that. So we get the anti-DAG approved, then we can submit, or they'll actually start looking at the facility plan. We'll submit it way ahead of that time, so that check mark in the box that you've submitted the facility plan, they just won't open it until after they approve the anti-DAG. Once that's done, the facility plan will get reviewed and approved, a couple more months there. And then we can have the design well underway at that point with that Walker system. Because of what we did there and how we got that approval, I submitted the facility plan. the anti-dag and the design all at the same time. And I said, here's the technology, here's why, and here's what it looks like, so you can review the whole thing all at once. And that got approved then in that time frame, a couple of years, but it got done. So this, I mean, yeah, it's a couple of months to design it, but
This is a summertime project.
Would it be to our advantage not to go quite that fast because of the work that you're trying to do to get another 10% reduction?
no, it definitely would. It definitely would. So right now, we submit the anti-dag. We go through that
Right.
probably 90-day period. The facility plan will be sitting there. That will be another 60-day probably review on that. I'll have some idea, but I don't know if I'll have a definitive answer
Sure.
on a revised design standard for that. But
Just to remind everybody, when is it that we need to have this thing operational? By the DNR standards?
2021.
July of 2021, ain't it?
yeah, I think so. Yeah, I was just gonna confirm the date. but
I
I'll
think I
trust you
read that a
guys.
little bit ago.
Yeah.
So what that really means is, and how long will it take to construct?
This will, with sludge removal in the lagoons being part of what will have to be done here, that will have to be done in the fall. Farmers have completely quit taking sludge in the spring due to wanting to plant early and the wet springs and everything else. So that has to be done in the fall. So that's kind of what will start, because we can't build anything really outside the lagoon cells. So we have to get the sludge out first, so it'd have to be a fall start. So I would say the absolute soonest that you would start anything would be fall of 19, fall of 20. And then we'd have a year to get it done by 2021.
So you're saying that fall of 19, we need to take the sludge out, or the fall of 20 that we need?
Fall of 20, yeah.
Okay. All right.
We got it bid in the spring of 20 and
Would that be a separate thing?
That's a year, that's a year and a half.
Right, right.
You couldn't get the sludge out in the fall of 19 and then
I
start
was
the
gonna say,
project in the
this
spring of
here
20?
paper says start in September 19 and finished in May of 21.
But would that be a separate thing where you'd to clean out the sludge and then
you can.
start on that?
You can do it separate. We've done it both ways, where we've actually had a separate letting and separate contract for sludge removal only. And that contractor came in and pulled out the sludge. The only issue with that is then we get into, the next contractor comes along and says, they didn't get all the sludge out. You need to pay me to get the rest of it out because we can't deal with this. So if we have the same contractor do it both, or they hire a sub, then that contract
Or
is
you
a
can
little
do
bit easier
stages.
contractually.
Say you come in the fall of 19, you get sludge out in the spring, we start breaking ground on dirt work that needs to be done.
Yeah, or you get that contract, you get the design approved and the contract let, and then have a milestone to have that sludge removed in 19, and then if we have a fall, and we don't start right into winter in beginning of November, then they could be working into January typically, so.
So from start to finish, how long is it gonna take?
About a calendar year.
So we can't start in September of
So you should
20
be able,
and be done by July of 21.
No.
So we're gonna have to
so
start
you
in
won't start
19.
in fall of 19 and finish.
So that's starting in fall of 20 was, I think, a mistake.
Yep,
We're gonna have to start in the fall of 19.
For sludge removal.
for sludge removal, yeah.
And then when weather permits, move on into groundbreak.
Now, the other piece, the other component of this project is the integrated plan, which I haven't really even discussed, but is a necessity because your compliance dates say everything done by July 2021, including all your SSOs eliminated. So there is a compliance schedule. There's an integrated plan that we're working on that will go through all capital improvement projects that you guys are looking at system affordability from a ratepayer standpoint, and looking at how much you can afford to do without bankrupting the city, and phase that over a time frame that allows us, the goal is to build the treatment plant. Maybe not quite all of it. One of the things that I also am looking at is not putting in UV disinfection right away. We're having good luck with meeting all disinfection limits coming out of the Sager. So if we can put this in and monitor it for a couple of years and save the disinfection, that will take a couple $100,000 off the bottom line of the price, at least up front. Then if we can't get all the bacteria out and we need to add it, then we add it as a subsequent phase. That type of stuff is gonna be written into the integrated plan so that we do kind of phase some of this in. I'd also like to really look at whether or not we can take that approach with, let's do the integrated plan and design the Sagers the way that we want to and look at it. And if that doesn't work, then we add on the pieces that we need to later on and see if they'll buy that. But that is one piece of it. And if in this process, as we're going through it and looking at all this, when we've drafted that integrated plan, we may look and see the 2021, that July 2021 date maybe is not really feasible. And we'll say we want July 2022 or we want September of 2021. We'll look out to how do we extend that completion date, because we're going through the integrated planning process anyway. There's nothing that says we absolutely have to meet these compliance dates, but it's just kind of, it looks good. It gives them a good feeling that you're trying to do things to move forward, whereas some communities just don't.
Chris, did you have something a minute ago?
Okay, what happens if these guys work magic and we have a housing boom, we get another 100 or 200 homes in the next 10 years? Does that change anything in your analysis?
Your rates will go down.
Yeah, all right. But in terms of systems, it wouldn't make any.
As far as systems that I would recommend, up to 1 million gallons, I'm very confident and comfortable with this recommendation.
Okay.
And that's kind of, at that point, once you start to get beyond 1 million gallons, if you're really racing past that, that's where the land space availability and everything becomes more of an issue. And that's where that package plant, the Aeromod plant, will start to really come forward as being the better alternative at that point. So then you'd be a major facility in the state, you'd have nitrogen and phosphorus limits, that all triggers at that 1 million gallon mark. So yeah, if you work your magic, and that happens in the next year or two here and you have a huge boom, then hold off. We got to change our recommendation.
But 200 homes isn't gonna, I mean, that's enough, that would be an incredible number of homes for us, and that's not gonna change our cycle over 1 million gallons.
Yeah. And looking back in the facility plan, we have the historical population trends, and I mean, for a long time, it's gone up and down, but it's flat. Yeah, it's pretty flat. So if you guys do get some major in here, you get a big water using industry or something else, hopefully they can build their own plants and not go to the wastewater.
Right. Let's say that you're successful in getting a reduction of 10% on the Sagar. We are able to delay the UV, whatever magic else there is. Is it reasonable to assume that this thing could come in about 4.5 million?
I would say no.
What would be the number?
I would not say that today, that
Well, I'm
That
not
would be
holding you.
reasonable to assume.
I'm not holding you
But-
to it, but I mean, potentially here is,
potential is yes. With the three big things are that little 10% reduction in size.
right,
The lack of UV, and if my rock costs are that conservative, that number can come down. That's probably the biggest bang for the buck right there that could really impact my
the rock cost.
OPC, the rock cost.
So could be below 5 million.
It could. As long as you're not holding me to that.
Chisel it in stone and fill it with blood.
Historically, when we come in at the facility plan level, whatever magic we do on the value engineering side seems to be offset by something else, and we're usually pretty close on those costs by the time it's all said and done, but.
Darren, how far is Eldon?
20 minutes.
18, probably 18 miles.
If I can get a bidding war between Dowd Stone and Terry Wynn.
Yeah.
you can get-
Well, I mean, I don't know how much rock we need too. I mean, it might be the type of rock that's available too.
How many ton of rock would we need?
Just a second.
River rock's kind of expensive, but it would last so much better than
Yeah.
limestone. We don't have very good limestone.
They won't put in limestone if it doesn't meet their spec.
We don't have that kind of spec.
You'd have to haul that up from,
Got to haul it up from Missouri.
yeah.
They got some hard limestone down there.
But at least there is a little competition with sand and river rock here.
Probably get a trucker bed with rock hauling it too.
17,000 yards.
10,000 cubic yards.
Mhm. And we have that estimated at $55 a yard installed. So that's purchased and hauled.
About
So that's $1 million in rock.
you have about 1.5 ton per yard, 1.5 to 1 3/4 ton per yard. That'd be a pretty good chunk for them. They'd like to get that.
Somewhere around 27,000 tons.
They don't like each other, so they'd be
27,000 ton.
a couple truckloads. They quoted all.
What do you think, Jack?
Yeah.
I might wanna go buy a dump truck pretty soon.
Start hauling the north?
Hauling it today. Stockpile.
I had a guy want me to go get a dump truck for him today.
Cost him a load of rock to bring her home.
It was at Peterson.
Well, the next-
Peterson, Iowa.
The next step here is to agree, I assume, on a Sager system. From there, we'll start looking at impacts that on costs.
Everything I've seen, that seems to be pretty clearly the way to go.
I wanted to limit it real bad, but Sager's outplaying it, so.
I think what we'll do is start looking at these numbers and then come up with an understanding of how we would put together a rate structure. You need to have that information too. But if we're in agreement on Sager, then we'll know what to work.
I'd like to view them down on that other system with the algae belts. I think it'd be cool.
Yeah.
We're kind of into being innovative, aren't we?
So, that's what I mean, that was what I was thinking the whole time.
And selling the algae off afterwards.
We have done quite a bit of exploration. Matt has worked hard to get them down on price. And I mean, to me, $900,000 is a pretty good give, right?
Yeah.
We've also looked at, talked with IEDA and some other potential funders about, hey, because this is an innovative solution, is there some demonstration monies that might be available? And really haven't gotten any takers yet. I'm not saying we couldn't, but at this point, if we were gonna find additional funding to go to an innovative type of thing, we're probably looking at corporate foundations and those kinds of things. And we don't have a lot of experience there. I'm not saying we can't do it, but I'm just saying if you're serious about wanting to look at it, we'd have to come up with another $1.5 million, either ourselves or through funders, right?
RMI have any connections with somebody that'd be interested in funding part of that?
Right now, they're asking us for money, so I don't know. Yeah, I mean, we can do some exploration if you want us to do exploration, but keep in mind the time frame that we're looking at, right?
I think we have to,
You guys let us know.
I think we have to focus
I
on
think it'd
what's
be
gonna
neat,
work.
but like I said, with considering the money difference and the DNR approvals, I'm afraid the Sagers.
What would the return be on the algae sales?
They guarantee a certain amount and they guarantee that they will take it. And they say that there are buyers out there, because I asked, what if you guys go away? You're a new company. If you can't get this thing off the ground, and this is your only sell because you knock $1 million off the price and nobody else can afford it after this, what do we do if you're not buying the algae? Oh, well, there's buyers all over. Okay, well, think about it. How many algae farms do you see in Iowa that are selling algae to a buyer? If there was that lucrative of a market out there for algae, they wouldn't be coming to Bloomfield to get a system in to grow algae and wastewater. They would be growing algae somewhere else close to home and selling it.
Might be
So-
too innovative for
It
us.
sounds
Yeah.
kind of like the hedge ball thing.
No, because they're making money.
But they're not everywhere.
So as I've processed this and I've had these discussions with these guys and the Gross One folks have been into our office 3 different times to talk to us and answer questions. They've been very good and they're great people to work with, and it's an Iowa-based company and there's all those reasons. But at the end of the day, the thing that I keep going back to is when I go home at night and I lay down on my pillow, if I've signed off on a set of plans for this rotating algae bioreactor, I'm going to be laying in bed thinking about it every night for an hour before I can finally fall asleep. And because it's not proven, and I don't know that it's going to work. I go home after designing a Sager and I'm out, lights off, eyes shut, because I know that it's going to work, because I've seen it work, and just my background alone and working on it for all 20 years of my career, I've worked with that type of system and I'm very, very confident in it. And I look at results that are sent to me by systems every week and I look at them and I say, okay, everything looks good. If I see something that starts to come askew, I know exactly what to do, and I'll call the operator and tell him you need to make a change. And he changes it. And that's the level of confidence and faith that I have in it. Would I like to have that in this algae system? Yes, because like I said, if I could sell one and build one and design one, boy, I could do another one too, because now I would have both of those technologies in my back pocket. So I would really like to press forward and design that for you guys. But
Matt, you said it would take us a couple of years to get that approved. Would they push back our deadline to do that?
they would. They did in Walker with that technology, because we said, we've submitted it all to you. We're just waiting for you to tell us go. We met the deadlines that you asked for. And so, yeah, there was no enforcement or anything that came down. They just let us do it.
So that could cut both ways though. It could be really good because we could maybe get some money set aside, but then again, costs could go up, so it's.
Sounds like it may be a little too innovative.
You guys do know I'm gonna push innovation, right?
Well, I do, and your light bulb lit up when he talked about it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I've been pushing Matt. I said, let's make this work. And the other day we talked about it. I was the guy saying we can't do it because I can't figure out how to make the numbers work. And I want to make the numbers work. That's why I called people up and said, find me some money, right? But I can't find a way to get there. I'd like to. I'd really like to.
He hasn't attempted to sell me yet. He's that Sager.
I mean, you could have solar panels on
I've been,
that
trust me, I
greenhouse.
know. I've been looking at this.
But you wouldn't be able to do that because then you'd block the sun.
We could have butterflies in there, birds.
You can still put a greenhouse up. That'd be cheap. You could build the greenhouse for the savings over what it cost.
So what's the chances of having to, at
I
any
love
time,
what's the
having to do
chances.
the nitrogen and phosphate thing?
At this point, and Chris and Danny and I had this conversation the other day. At this point, you're looking at a 20-year life cycle cost here. I don't believe that you're gonna have to do anything in that 20-year period. So theoretically, whatever you do in 20 years is gonna be needing to be redone. So when you make a decision on total nitrogen and total phosphorus, that's a 20-year decision. I wouldn't spend the money on a 20-year design life technology to remove nitrogen and phosphorus or something in 20 years you might have to rebuild. And these technologies, the Sager technology right now, we've got, some of the original systems that were built have been on the ground for 30 years and they're still working fine. So the design life there, it's rock in a liner. You have blowers and stuff that those are gonna need replacement parts and need to be replaced, but the main part of that treatment system, the expensive part, is rock. So it's gonna last like concrete, it's gonna last well beyond what 20 years would be.
In worst case, you just buy some more rock.
Dig them out, put them back in. You'd have to probably do a liner and everything else.
Sell the old ones with the
Yeah,
algae.
sell-
Sell them to the algae guy.
Well, and I don't even think you would need new rock. You could
Just wash
get
it.
the rock out, wash it. I mean, at that point, you bring in a wash plant and wash it and put it right back in. So I've seen them suck them out with vac trucks before. Suck out the rock with a vac truck and clean it, put it back in. But that's so with these other technologies, the Lemna, those covers, I don't think they're gonna last much beyond that 20-year life. That plastic's gonna rot and you're gonna need to replace them. Those algae wheel, the rotating biological algae, the belts, you're gonna have to replace the belts every 3 to 5 years. And a complete rehab every 8 years, I think is what they estimate. And so after 20 years, I don't know what's gonna be left on those that you haven't rebuilt at least twice. So that's,
I'm trying, Chris.
yeah. So that's it.
Ship sailing away.
Yeah. So I would say, in 20 years, if you get nitrogen and phosphorus limits, and I actually talked with the gross wind people about this, because they were looking at what we need for risk management from my standpoint, number one, because again, my signature goes on these, so you guys come after me if the thing doesn't work, and then I gotta go after them. So what can we do? And we had actually talked about a combined system. And if phosphorus limits become a reality, the Sager system right now, we have enough data to support that it will do your nitrogen removal, total nitrogen removal to meet a 10 annual average. The systems we've got in now are running about 3 total nitrogen through the summer, spring, fall, and summer. So that's well below the 10 limit. So on an annual average, even if those cold months, it comes up a little bit, you're still below 10. So the nitrogen shouldn't be an issue. It's not approved from a design standard by the DNR yet, but once you start gathering data, if you show it, they ain't gonna make you do anything for nitrogen because you prove that your system works. And that's how the nutrient strategy is implemented. You test, you see what your system will do, and if it'll do 10, you don't have to do anything for it. The phosphorus is the one that's the trick. So combine it with this algae system, put that up front, take the phosphorus out up front, and then run it the rest of the way through your plant. Might be a possibility, that would be down the road, would be a way to look at it, is that there may be a cheaper alternative than what I've got in here, which is to dump a bunch of chemical in and settle that out. That's how we're treating it with the Sager system.
Just one additional point, the VP of operations for the people that make the rotating RAB system is a ball, not a ball related to me. So I just want, we tried.
But the technology was developed at Iowa State and I'm a Hawkeye, so.
Attaboy, I'm with you.
Well, you should have told us that a long time ago, wouldn't even brought it up.
There we go.
Well, I guess it sounds like the existing lagoon and Sagar system's pretty much the
Way to go.
consensus of everybody.
Just have a simple motion to get that
So,
direction.
yeah, simple motion to go with that system.
So move.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thanks, man.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you.
Sorry for long-winded presentation, but
We need the long-winded
wanted to be as
presentation.
thorough as I needed to be for you guys, so. The next step will be getting this and the anti-dig back to you. The anti-dig will have some weird stuff in there, so I'll send you those reports, and if you look at them and say, please come down and explain these to us, I promise I won't take this long, but I'm more than happy to do that again, so get those things approved, so. All right?
Can I ask one thing? When you redo these, can you put the right mayor in there?
Yes.
Chris this in there again?
Yeah, that's, you probably pulled it off the website.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's just small.
Can you send me a complete list of all the current council members, Mayor? To make sure I have everything correct. That would be wonderful.
Okay.
My apologies.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you.
Review CIP and request direction.
I have had no input as far as any.
I know we had some questions early. You brought up the fact of maybe liking to add something in there on the sidewalks on the square.
No, I'm not just saying sidewalks, because when you look at the square, you've gotta go beyond sidewalks. You've gotta take care of the stormwater first. So if that takes care of, we have to look at that plan and what to do with the stormwater. And I know a sort of subject, foundations and sidewalks. Now then, I'm not beyond allowing, yes, we'll do from the curb in to the buildings, but we gotta take care of that stormwater. And then if we can do that much of it, block that stormwater at that point and get it away and take care of what's underneath the sidewalks, the foundations, put new sidewalks in. That needs to be done. Now then.
I guess that's kind of what I meant by sidewalks.
Okay,
I wasn't-
all right. I just want to,
Yeah, I mean, I
Clarify that.
think we're pretty much all aware that in order to do the sidewalks, we've got to do curb and gutter and we've got to do stormwater and some
Yeah.
other infrastructure
Because,
under there at the same time.
we've talked about when you look across the square, the center parking out there is higher than the sidewalks. I've not put a transit on it, but
You don't have to, you can see it.
I used to run a bulldozer and a scraper behind it,
Well,
So-
the center parking being higher than the sidewalks isn't a big deal if you've got,
if you've got a way
you've
for
got
the water to
intakes
get
at the
away.
curbs to take it away.
Right. If you've got a system to get the water away.
Well, I think first thing we need to do is somehow inspire everybody to get their foundation stakes.
True.
And we had talked in the past about offering a low-interest loan to the property owners.
We've got to figure out how to get that accomplished. So whether we do it and apply it to their taxes in the process, or we, have low interest loans available through whoever to help them do that. Scott's a building owner, I don't know what his foundation looks like. Maybe his is good. I hope it is. But,
But also when you're not talking about doing so much excavation, it's not quite as big of a deal. It's not like you're gonna be tearing the entire square out and working on it. You basically need to come in there, cut 3 foot out from the curbs, lay in a storm sewer, then put back in a curb and gutter and the sidewalk. And I think like what somebody had mentioned in Mount Pleasant where you've got so many different elevations of the doorways. They make I think it was the curb area is the ADA compliant and then you mold it to the fit of the
yeah, I
individual.
haven't been down there to see that. So
I've been to a lot of towns lately, and that's the one thing that I look at, and they replan the streets or the curb and guttering part, and the sidewalks they just float along the buildings and just kind of pick them up, but they all have a common curb. Then a lot of them will lay brick where the lighting and stuff is, so that if they ever need to, they can take it. It's not C-mortared in, it's just set in, they can take it out to work on it, but the sidewalks just kind of follow the doorways. Some of them have curbs, some of them have
Ramp.
small angles,
Mhm.
ADA compliant stuff, basically.
Well, let's talk about the money for this. I think that's a TIF project.
Could be, it's all in the TIF district, so it could be TIFed.
I mean, that's something that probably will have to do some engineering on, to say the least.
Yeah.
To get an understanding of where we're at, but, the other question is how much do you want to bite off and chew here, because I think it's recognized that Madison is the street that's probably the highest priority. Do you want to start trying to take care of Madison first and then go?
Yeah, but it's also the one that's gonna be the biggest thorn. I'm almost thinking whatever side gets their foundations in order first wins.
Now we're gonna have a
Get your stuff fixed.
Darren, I get that, and I think the question is there gonna be as much motivation to fix foundations in Franklin and Jefferson because they're not as impacted?
No, but if they want their new sidewalks, they might be.
Well,
And then
motivated.
if we're talking,
That's not gonna be the driving factor though, is it?
if we're talking about Madison, are we talking about how much of Madison? Are we gonna start where we finished the addition on South Madison, which is at the intersection at the newspaper office? You start there and come across the square and go all the way to where we put in the new paving at the cemetery, which is the way it should be. But, or do you start at the cemetery and work that way and try to get things done on the square in
Well,
a different project at the same time?
I think we're just talking about the square as far as the sidewalks and the drainage concern and the TIF. Then I think Madison on out is a different project. And as far as how far off the square, I don't know whether you go a half a block or a block. Cause I mean, you got your TIF district to think of.
Can you find a good stopping spot on that, besides from one end to the other?
Well, that's why I'm saying,
I
you know, you include that side of the square
I
as
know, but
well.
there's no good, I mean,
Yeah.
if you flip a coin.
You all looked at segments
Yeah.
of Madison and you determined through the process which ones were a priority.
Well, definitely Short Street to the cemetery is the worst in Madison.
Right, and that's at the top of the list. And that's not a TIF project either.
No, that's why I'm saying I think the square is a separate project from the rest of
Yeah,
Madison.
I agree with you, and I think.
So we can start at this end and work that way.
But if we
Catch
tip the
North
other
Street
end, you can
and-
start,
You can do the TIF project isolated from the rest of the SIP because you're talking, CIP, because you're talking about a different funding source.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the big issue here was when we talked about doing the streets that we have identified in prioritization, none of them were TIF projects.
But the big problem with Madison on the square is what do we do with those two buildings? That, I think, is gonna be a long-term headache until we hammer out what to do there, whereas.
I can't let this issue go by without saying that we need to talk about stormwater management behind those buildings too.
Well, true.
I mean, you gotta fix both sides. And that's still TIF. And again, if you look at that block versus the other two that was generally addressed by the streetscape plan, Madison is by far the toughest fix. And might be if you do that one, the other ones that come in the future become easier and probably not as expensive too. You got flat ground, you really don't have much fall off the backsides of any of those.
But I think Madison on the square is gonna be time consuming,
Yeah, it is.
whereas the other ones we could get fixed up relatively quickly.
The north and the south would be easier to have people to go into those businesses off the alleys than Madison is. So,
And we circled around this discussion, Darren brought it up, is that those buildings at the end of the block may very well be your highest priority as far as a TIF project is concerned to begin with. Yeah, you get the foundations fixed, you might look at some of the stormwater management in the backside of these buildings, but the fact of the matter is that if you're gonna talk about Madison, as far as sidewalks is concerned, foundations and the buildings themselves are probably more important in the short run. I mean, if we're gonna talk about fixing these buildings in the context of the overall fix of sidewalks and all that, then maybe that's the study that needs to be commissioned here.
That's what I'm saying, I don't wanna hold up the other three sides just because of that one.
I don't even recall the sidewalks in the Washington portion. Is that much of a fix?
It's terrible.
Oh, yeah.
Terrible.
It's terrible. There's no
That's
curb.
probably almost the worst side.
Yeah.
Really,
And it's gonna be the harder side as far as stormwater, because it has no
Big
curb.
deal.
But now Franklin and Jefferson, they also need it. Their curbs are deteriorating, their sidewalks are bad, but they're gonna be the easy ones.
I think, you know, in the context of the CIP, I mean, we could probably amend it by saying, look, we need to have, we need to address how we're going to fix these things in a prioritization with an attention to the buildings, attention to the foundations, attention to stormwater management and the sidewalks.
Now, does the Historical Society have input when it comes to fixing their foundations, or is that just what you see? I mean, are they gonna want the basements fixed with brick in a certain way, or can you go in there and concrete it?
So if the Historic Preservation Commission, which is an arm of the city, it's generally looking at what's visible.
And there would be, even in that regard, there would be deference given to structural integrity anyway. If you have to fix something and you really gotta fix it for fear of losing it all, then you have to ask the question, what's the point of historical preservation if you're not fixing it the right way?
didn't Butch use concrete under the front of his?
I don't know about Butch, but I'm pretty sure that,
Jake
Needs did.
Yeah.
We used to do.
Yeah, I know that there's been concrete put in and
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I had thought about being able to go up there in the winter and do concrete work on front walls. But,
So, you know, I don't know whether, I hate to bring it up, whether the streetscape plan has that section of it for the sidewalks and the foundations is usable.
There's a lot of
A
information.
lot of information in
there's a
there.
lot of information as far as elevations and stuff like that.
And the real,
We approved a long time ago to get somebody to look at that plan and give us some information. and it's
HR
never-
Green, I think the real point though is to understand what we want them to look at. Because if we're saying, well, let's look at the streets, you're not interested in the streets right now. You're really interested in
I don't think the
stormwater,
streets-
in the sidewalks and the building integrities.
right.
Okay, so then let's talk about it in that regard.
Mhm.
I mean, we might have a little bit more direction if we're gonna say something to take a look at these things. But I think there has to be an understanding to start with is that if we're going to go down this road as far as doing something to the courthouse square, it's gotta be TIF.
That's the best funding source.
Well, it's on, the only one if we want to do it in the next 5 years. Am
True,
I not right?
you're
It
right.
might be the only one, period.
Right.
I mean, depending on what you wanna do with,
I mean, if we're gonna move forward with some of this other stuff,
you,
goodness, I mean, that's all we got.
if we're looking at, and I'll just reiterate this, the proposal was to do a one-time tax increase to get a $2 million every 5 years, but 2 million over 10 for property taxes, 2 million over 10 staggered 5 years off, continuing with what we've already done with LOST, so that you always have $2 million every 5 years. And the assumption is that you're gonna need that irrespective of what you got on your list, because it's not gonna be TIF, it's gonna be replacement stuff. And in fact, this plan is gonna get tweaked a little bit more anyway, because, we just got notice of the $600,000 grant for water and sewer fixes
Mhm.
here. And while we had the section of East Street from Franklin to South completely eliminated from consideration by you all, we could now put that on the list if we pay for half that street. The other half would come out of the grant and utilities. So you might want to reconsider that, because now you're digging this up and you have a chance to fix it at a far more reduced cost.
Yeah, if you're gonna dig it up, you just go fix it.
That's my point. And
I'm not gonna argue about fixing each.
Well, but the thing about it is that, you know, the plan should not be considered as, you know, fixed, biblically fixed. I mean, it needs to be modified as opportunities present themselves.
How far can we get down the list for 2 million?
I'm gonna say if we get halfway down that list, we'll be lucky.
So you're thinking to item 4,
Yeah.
and then 5 is the East Street part you're talking about that might fall under this.
That East Street part that what we're talking about, though, you all didn't want to do anything south of Franklin.
Don't look at me. That was on the scoring thing.
The scoring thing.
Don't say they didn't want to do it, they just didn't score high enough.
Well, okay, then they
Yeah,
didn't
because
score high.
Crestview Street's number 9.
Yeah. That was a scoring, not a
And
vote.
if you remember the conversation, I said, geez, I thought the section from Franklin down to South Street was probably some of the toughest on East Street. But, you know, okay, that was your choice, okay, fine. That doesn't mean that we can't make adjustments and opportunities gonna present themselves. Yeah, with the water sewer project, there's this one little block, what is that street, that goes out from the hospital? It's right by that parking lot on the west side of the hospital. It's one block street.
Good street.
Good.
No, it's north of it.
Duffield.
It's not, it's north of
It's a
it,
2-block street that comes off of, that goes from the,
over to west.
it goes to West Street.
Duffield,
Duffield, right.
Duffield.
Duffield Street.
That one's in pretty tough shape, but we're gonna be ripping that up with this grant, so. But there was low volume traffic, but you also had a lot of traffic going into the hospital parking lot from there, I'm guessing. But now all of a sudden, that could rise to the top because you're doing the underground.
You got other factors that could change the priority of the list.
Yeah,
The CIP
But we
is
can
just
use
a
other-
suggestion, and that's a plan,
but
but
it's the
Other
baseline.
funding
Baseline.
methods for some of it.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't be paying for a complete redo of Duffield there, you would be taking a lot of the money, as we're talking about, from the grant, from the utilities. There was this discussion about, you know, well, let's take a lot of our reserve funds. Most of our reserve funds really aren't general fund, they're in the utilities. But here's where you start using these reserve funds to fill in grant costs, to let's say that, let's say that we have an overrun on a project that costs us another $150,000. That's where you come up with a gap filler, is these reserves. You don't count on these reserves to drive a project, you count on these reserves in smaller increments to finish projects if necessary. But the idea is not to
or
borrow,
add something too that makes sense.
the idea is not to borrow anything higher than approximately $2 million every 5 years, but I mean, to offset that. And that was, from my perspective, that was the nice thing about this plan is that you'd have one tax increase for streets, and then when that 10-year bond issue expires, you just do another bond issue for the same amount, assumedly with the same tax rate or the same amount of taxes necessary. So you're doing this all the time, and you're doing this actually on average $400,000 a year as far as repair replacement is concerned. That probably isn't enough, but at least you can say that we're honestly doing something here, and it's certainly within our realm of affordability.
I mean, nobody wants to raise taxes,
No.
but at least if you're seeing something for it.
But I thought that that's part of the reason why the council was really, really nailing down on this, is that I'm raising taxes, it's going straight to streets.
When would the tax increase go? I mean, when would it be assessed?
Well,
Like in this fall of 2020?
here's what would happen is that we would go out, if you're, the intent right now with the plan, of course, it's been vetoed, but the plan was, we would go out and borrow the money in June of this up. Our first payment would be a interest payment in December, and then our first P&I payment would be in June of 2020. So you would actually see assessment on this thing coming out on the next tax bill. But understand that that first interest payment, we would actually probably pay out of reserves because it'll be an interest payment, so it's not that big of a number, but we gotta get money to pay the rest.
So it would actually be in March of next year would be the first
Yeah.
increase?
No, it would be in October of.
September
of 19.
of 19.
Let me think about that.
The first
You
payment,
can't do it. You
You'd have to
can't
hit,
do
you'd have to
it.
hit the budget and all that.
You'd have to hit it in,
it's gonna have to be March of 2020.
yes, it would. Yes, it would. And that.
Because your
that's
first
right,
P&I
that's right. The first P&I would be
In June of 2020.
2020.
right, but we'd still have to have, well, we could probably structure it where we don't have to, but we'd have an
Interest payment in December of 19.
Right, so, no, it would be, the first time you'd see it would be in 2020. And remember, now I also put in that plan that, these are 10-year bonds. I also indicated in there that, the following year, if you want to do longer-term projects, a 20-year bond, you could do a 20-year bond once every 7 years, ostensibly beginning in 2021. And still keep it reasonably within your debt service limit. The cost of that borrowing would be obviously half on an annualized basis is what you would do with the streets. The estimate right now for a 10-year bond at $2 million is about $235,000 a year. I'm not saying you have to do these things from the standpoint of making other borrowings not related to streets. You have that opportunity if you so desire. But the point is that you have debt capacity to do this. Now, that debt capacity is impacted if you use TIF to do the Court Square, for instance, or any TIF project. If you use TIF, the debt capacity gets squeezed and your ability to borrow the $2 million for a 20-year issue gets narrower unless you counted the TIF in portion of that
I don't
cost.
like the 20-year plan. It spreads it out way too far. You don't get nothing done.
Well, actually, the reason why you would extend it out 20 years is that the improvement would be something that you could justify being there. And a 20-year fix. That's why you're talking about 10 years for streets, because you're looking at these streets and typically 10 or 12 years is what you do for streets, because that's technically the lifetime of them. Unless you have a very active maintenance program.
We can get 30 or 40 out of them around here. Or longer.
Well, you see,
We drive
That-
careful.
that 30 or 40 is what's caused our problems here, because we've been doing that too much.
So to circle back on the square for just a second, can we use our cash reserves to loan to property owners on the square to fix their foundation?
Go ahead, Chris.
The question of the legality on whether, so we've been talking about this on-bill financing program. And when we first lent money for that, our auditor flagged that and said, hey, we don't think it's legal for either the city or the utility to lend money. So in fact, I just met with folks yesterday, and we think that from a utility perspective, we can make the case that yes, there's a clear precedent for us to be able to do that. But when you talk about lending money to a private entity to rebuild their building. I don't think we can get there.
That's what I was asking.
I don't think we could grant it, but I don't think we can lend it.
So basically, they're gonna have to arrange their own financing to fund their basement.
If we don't use TIF.
But
Oh, no, even if you used to.
unless we grant it.
Granted, meaning give them the money, not lend them.
I hate to go down that hole. You've already got some people that fix their basements on their own.
I mean, this is a tough call. I mean, the idea of the project in the past was to fix it, you know, with a grant, if you will. I mean, fix the sidewalks, fix underground, fix those foundations with a grant. That was what that project was all about.
I can get on board with the sidewalks, because while it's theirs, everybody in the community uses it. But the basements, you either knew the condition of it when you bought it, or you've owned it long enough to let it get into that condition. And not everybody is using foundation like you are walking on the sidewalks, and you already had some people finish or fix their basements on their own. And so I don't think you're being fair to the ones that have taken initiative to do it themselves.
Well, the question is how much longer can we wait? I mean, will there be more failures? We already see that we've got one failure.
And not to bring up a sore subject, but that right there is what scared me about streetscape.
I mean, the decision's been made. I think the real question is, what do we do now?
I don't know, is there any way we can motivate people to bring their foundations up? Or how many of them are that bad, or, I mean, I haven't gotten a list. You've got a list of them?
Well, so when they did some assessment for when they put together the plan for the square that identified every building that they thought was gonna need. Understand at that point, we were talking about excavating down a foot and removing all the vaults that were underneath the sidewalk. So we have basically a list of all the vaults, the voids underneath the sidewalk. And what we were talking about was not repairing the entire foundation, but blocking up the vault opening into the building. So we weren't ever talking about, I just want to be clear, when we were talking about before, we weren't talking about going in and redoing somebody's entire foundation on the front. It was simply where there was a vault and we were blocking up that opening to the vault.
But some of them, you're gonna get in the point is, where do you stop and start?
Right.
I mean, if this bricks, you take it out by hand, obviously you're not just blocking the wall, you're gonna have to go out farther.
Right. So that's what we have, is a list of those vaults and openings. We don't have a list of conditions of all the foundations.
We'd probably have a pretty good idea. Based
Well,
on
if I had
the
the list, I'd go around and talk to people and see if they want to help, you know.
I mean,
I would be willing personally to go around and do it as cheap as I could.
I think the real question is whether in fact you got people that are financially capable of handling it at the same time. I mean, you got some of these building owners that don't have a whole lot of cash.
And then you get rid of the building.
If you can. And then are they motivated? I mean, I think there's some building owners that probably say, I don't care. You know, if it falls down, okay, I'm done.
Want to buy it?
Yeah. I mean, we might be in the business of anything of buying a lot of $5,000 buildings.
For the right number, I suppose.
I mean, I have
Put a big head over the top.
I think that, you know, we talked about this at a Main Street meeting recently. That assemblage of property, buying more property publicly, it's probably a real good thing from the standpoint of trying to renovate and rehabilitate the courthouse square. Because then you can control the front end process and at the same time try and incite new investment and new decision-making about how to use these buildings.
I didn't want to drag all the way back into the square. I just wanted to know if that was legal or not, or
I
possible.
don't think we can get there.
Yeah.
So they're gonna do a different route.
So what's the dollar amount that the city assesses tax against?
I would just want to come back to that. There is one possibility, right, that might work, and that is make a grant to, say, Main Street for assisting building owners, and Main Street could lend money.
Yeah.
And then when everything gets paid back, Main Street says, we're gonna make a contribution to the city. I mean, so there is maybe a vehicle here.
Mary, your question was,
There's always another way around the horse.
was our assessed valuation? I'll give you a round number.
And it's somewhere around 74 million.
No, it's more than that. We have, our ability to borrow is based upon 5% of the overall assessed valuation of the city. We can borrow about 5.6 million right now in principal. So if you take 5.6 and multiply it by 20, you got 112. Now, understand that at 112, if you're looking at it from a TIF standpoint, not all that goes, some of that, the school gets stuff taken out of it. But if you're just looking at it as a straight, we tax everybody the same as far as the city tax is concerned. You're looking at $112 million. I've already calculated, I mean, $2 million costs you $235,000 a year in P&I for 10 years. Which means that you'd go from 1406 to 16. It's on there. You put that on the screen, did you see it? Oh, it's
Like 340?
it was like 340. It's about 340. It was about 6.
So what's the impact to the average home? What's the impact of that to a $200,000 home?
$3.40 a thousand.
Too many times that.
$100,000, 100 times $3.40, $340.
But the value and the assessed value is two different things. So if the assessed value is 100,000, yeah.
I don't think our assessments here are that out of whack.
Well, that don't work out very good. If you got 112 million and you're raising it $3.41, you come up with almost 400,000.
Can you, give me that for a second, because I know the numbers are right in here.
I mean, I called the assessor master and she told me it was 68 million and then we had like 4.5 million from TIF, so it made it like 74 or 73 million something is what we assessed, is what we taxed on. And that's what, that works out to where the 200, you know, where what we're wanting to increase comes up to right what we need to pay.
Here's what I calculated on that handout. $100,000 is $342 a year, $28.50 a month. Now, that's before the deductions, you know, the homeowner's deduction and all that kind of stuff. I'm just saying, here's what $100,000 of value is, assessed value. Now, homes might be less than that. A $50,000 house without any other deductions and all that, $171 a year. Now, there's all kinds of things that are eliminated from taxes. I mean, you deal with schools differently, for instance. But what I'm talking about is just what is the city. Because nobody else.
But we don't tax on that 112,000. Or 112 million. There's deductions from that, I mean, because that, if you take that times, divide it by 1,000,
That'd be basically the value of everything in
you're
town.
380,000, so we
Yeah.
can't raise them more than what we need to pay the bill.
That's right, that's right.
You got buildings that school owns that don't pay taxes.
Well, but you're not assessing those anyway.
No, but
So what I'm
That is-
saying
That is
is,
probably included in that 112 million of value of that.
I mean, we're talking about a $3.41 increase.
Per $100,000 of valuation.
Per $1,000 of evaluation, but is that the right number for the amount of money we need to pay the 200,000?
Well, I'll go check with them again. You know.
I mean, I'm just,
No, I
I wanna make
understand.
sure we have the right,
I understand.
I mean, if we only have to raise them 16% instead of 25%, I mean,
No, I understand.
we can't raise it more than we need to.
We will, to give you an understanding, you look at, look at the law enforcement center. That adds $1.13 per thousand to every tax property in the county. $1.13. Now, I understand that that's spread out over a much larger tax base, but think about it in context. You're not talking about a building that's what, more than 4 million, was it?
What, the building?
Yeah.
5.8.
5.8 million, there you go. But spread out over a huge tax base, that 340 is probably not that far off, but I'll check with her.
Because I think, what did she tell me, 386 million or something, so.
But here's the indicator for me, is that we know from the state and from the county for that matter, that we have the ability to tax, to run debt service, geo debt service at $5.6 million. And that is the limit, and it's 5% of the total assessed valuation. 20 times that's 112. And that number is well known. That's published. That number is published by the state, as a matter of fact. But I mean, that's how I derive this number is that we know what we can borrow, and that borrowing number is already established, not established by assessed valuation.
I just like to see them figures.
Okay. I mean, I'll go back to them and talk to them about it, but I don't think that we're going to see a whole lot of difference here. And if you think that, you know, if that brings it down, I mean, what you're saying is that instead of doing 2 million, we do something less?
No, I just want to make sure that I don't have an issue with doing the $2 million. I would just like to make sure that we do a minimum amount of tax increase as we have to do it.
That 341 is what.
And that 341 is what we need, and that anything else that we're gonna do, we're gonna find other funding for it besides try to raise taxes again in 5 years.
I would clearly understand that. That was the expectation I had all along, because to be honest with you, we don't have a whole lot more borrowing room to do if you wanted to do that. I mean, utilizing, like I said before, utilizing fund balances here as gap fillers.
But if we decided to use lost for something else,
then you're gonna do a lot less streets. So you're gonna do what you're doing right now.
But if you wanted to, you could do the 2 million again and raise taxes again to cover it.
Well, but that depends on whether you're borrowing it or not. Because we're using lost right now to pay off a borrowing. It's not like we're gonna stop paying, we're gonna end lost and all of a sudden have $2 million by putting it someplace else. You'd have to borrow to get that 2 million.
Well, I understand that, but I'm just saying, I'm not a big advocate for a tax increase, and I just want to make sure it's only getting increased the least amount it has to, and that this isn't going to be a common practice.
It's gonna be up to you. If you want to raise taxes more, but understand that you have limitations on how you can raise taxes. First
I
of all,
understand that too.
First of all you can do is raise taxes for all intents and purposes on things related to health insurance and IPERs.
I think what he's saying, we
without
want to make
limitations.
sure that we have to raise it 341 to get that number, that we can't do it less.
Well, sure, I understand that, but I gave you estimates, and is that gonna change a whole lot? I don't think so. I mean, if it's 321 versus 341, the impact is gonna be effectively the same. I'm sensitive to the idea of property taxes. I get it. I mean, we talked about the fact that our municipal property tax rate is pretty low.
See, I don't care if they was zero. We don't have to be at $20 because everybody else is at $20.
Well-
If we can maintain them low, let's keep them low. I don't want to raise them just because Joe Blow raised his. We just need to make sure that, I want the numbers to explain the reasoning behind the amount they need to be increased.
I don't think you're gonna see a whole lot of differentiation.
I wanna see the
I will get
numbers.
that- I will get you more numbers, but.
That prove the information to be right.
Okay. All I'm saying is don't expect miracles here.
I'm not looking for one. I just want the numbers.
All right.
If that's what it is,
I mean,
that's
I gave you
what it is.
what
I just wanna see it.
I gave you what I think are pretty solid estimates here.
Well,
And we'll prove it more. I mean, I think that there's a lot of issues as far as how do you get this data, but I was getting my data mostly from the state.
well, I was on the road one day and I just called the assessor just to try to get some numbers and he gave it to me in 5 minutes. So I'm not saying the information I got was correct either. I'm just passing what I got.
I understand. And realistically, the tax rates are not the things that the assessor does. The tax rates comes out of the clerk, right? The clerk? Who does the tax rate calculations?
Well, we do.
Well, we provide it, but it is certified by the county.
It's certified by Linda Humphrey, certified.
Yeah.
The auditor
Right.
It'd be the
certified.
auditor when it gets to
The
that before
auditor,
it gets to
yes.
me.
Yes, it's the auditor.
When it's abstracted in.
The assessor, all they do is determine what value is. They don't even determine how the assessments are applied. They just determine value. And
That's all I wanted was that's who I talked to.
all I know is that we have a borrowing limit of 5.6 million as established by the state through the county.
I think basically we just want a little more clarification on, and double checking the numbers at the next meeting.
That's fine. Is there anything else you want? I mean, as far as the CIP is concerned, have we changed any thinking about it?
No, not in my mind.
Does the CDBG change any of the funding for this other stuff
I don't think so.
that's in here?
What it might do, the CBDG might do, is take one of those street segments off the list, if you want to look at it that way, or we're going to just try and work as much as we can through the fund balances that we have to fill in the gap. I mean, we have $600,000, but we got $1.1 million of projects that we received the $600,000 for, so we got to come up with $500,000. And most of that is going to come, I assume, out of reserves that we have with the existing utilities.
You got any questions?
I think just, like, so my only concern is that this is a 10-year thing. I mean, you know, my neighbor's got a pretty expensive house, and we're looking at raising his taxes almost $700 on a street that he will never, it won't affect his street in front of his house.
For 20 years,
For 20 years almost, you know, so
Well,
it's a big thing. It's not something you just, yeah, sure, let's just raise them.
I got one of the busiest streets in town. You almost get a flat tire.
You know, and I know it's a bad excuse because most tax increases, people don't, I'm not gonna use the jail, or I hope I'm not, anyway. So, I know that's probably a poor excuse, but still, you know,
I think it's a
I
great
feel that that was, so if we can maybe narrow down the numbers some more.
Using the jail every night. So keep it guys in the wood.
Yeah.
Yeah, and these streets, I mean, we look at streets throughout the community and prioritize.
No, I know.
I mean, some of these streets are gonna be used, in fact, a lot of these streets are gonna be used by everybody in some way or manner because they tend to be pretty significant thoroughfares. They're not some cul-de-sac at the end of a, these streets are all heavily traveled, generally speaking. I can't think of any that aren't.
If she can get halfway to work with half her coffee, she can. It'll be smooth sailing from there
If
on.
you look at East Street and you look at North Street as examples, those are heavily trafficked school routes. Madison Street in the hospital area for obvious reasons. I'm trying to think of anything that really wasn't.
Arkansas and Crestview are the two busiest school route streets in Davis County.
And I put them on,
Bloomfield.
the list to,
But if you're talking about
Arkansas didn't get it.
school traveled streets, them are the two most heavily traveled.
I put them on the list, you guys didn't vote for it.
You.
I didn't vote for Crestview.
John voted for Carr Street, or rather,
Carr Street.
you voted for Carr Street, you're the only
I
one.
would never have done that.
Yeah, it's not that old.
Have you been down it?
Yeah, but
Have you been down it lately, though? It's a
Yeah.
lot better. I'm serious. Been a lot of improvement. They've ground out a lot of homes.
Scott,
It's in
I-
horrible shape.
The issue of taxes is one where you can't,
I'll have to quit going down to City Hall, maybe I can get my.
you can't have a discussion about property taxes in an à la carte manner. You can't go through the buffet line and say, I want this, but I don't want that. You're a member of a community, you're a member of a city. We're all in it together.
Someday their number will come up.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? If their streets aren't bad, good for them. Apparently, something happened in the past that they're fine.
You talk about the CBG grant, Jefferson Street from west to Pine, that's gonna be some sewer work, that's all just scheduled to be patched. So, like I said, if we wanted to make that paved instead of patched, because basically patching is, $65 a yard to patch, whereas paving is $45 a yard. So we could actually get more out of paving if we wanted to, of course, you gotta pour more, but that's where we're
That's a
gonna
little
have to.
detailed there. yeah.
Right, but that's just discussion, that part of that plan you need to think about is, do you wanna go back to patching or do you wanna pave it? So just,
But that's in context, it's a small.
right, that's small, but I'm just
project.
saying, that's, where you talk about the CBG grant and street, but
So one of those grants was for East Street sewer.
correct.
In fact, that was East Street Water? I think it was water there. The water, what you do is,
But that's another
what did we
thing,
say, we'd get half the street out of the water?
if you're gonna tear up the whole, or you tear up the whole street for one utility, do the other while you're there.
If
If they need it.
necessary, yeah. But the thing about it is that we would not be paying for those streets out of
Right.
the general fund. We would be
Oh, I agree,
paying for
it's gotta be flexible and take advantage of other funding when it comes along.
Okay, we've gone an hour.
So what do you want to do here?
Let's,
Verify your numbers, bring them back next meeting.
But we're not gonna modify the plan per se, it's just a matter of
No,
what
I'm
numbers are.
satisfied with the plan.
Is that what everybody else is saying here?
Bring back the numbers.
All right. I'd like to know where the assessor got her number, by the way. It doesn't make sense at all to me.
Yeah, I'm just,
Anything else on the CIP?
So if I bring back the number, then what's the process here? Because I need to know what you guys want to do. We then go another meeting and we go and put the same CIP, if the numbers are okay, we put the CIP back up for vote.
Can you just withdraw the veto, or do we have to re-vote the whole thing? or
Can you bring the numbers back to us and we can review them and then we can
Vote on it?
vote on it in the same meeting?
Well, we went through a process before where we put it out for a public hearing. And we had a public hearing, not that many people talked about it, but we had a public hearing. I think you probably gotta replicate that, and I think that probably how this would work is that if you're fine, you give me direction at the next meeting and we do it on the 20th. I don't think it's gonna harm anything as far as timing is concerned, because I wasn't planning on doing any significant work related to the bond work until
Well, you're not.
But it's not gonna affect any budget planning that you're working on now.
Talking about taking effect.
No, but what we would wind up doing is start doing the engineering work here. And we gotta get that in gear. Just as a matter of fact here, we probably need to talk about how you wanna do engineering. Do you wanna use that HR green all the way here? You see in the quality that you're getting here, do you wanna use green for this kind of stuff too?
Let's, put that on the agenda for next week and
Okay.
Make a decision.
Okay.
I don't know if you can get any type of numbers or what they, it's just the vibe.
Were they in the list of engineering firms for the East Street Culvert project? They weren't, were they?
Green? No, they don't do that kind of work really.
No, that was French Reniker and Shive Hatter. Was there anybody else?
Calhoun Burns and.
There was only 2 respondents. There was 10 groups that took.
There was 4. To give you a.
No, the engineer is different, you're talking about
Yes.
We're talking, how many?
Engineering, the design of it.
The engineering and design.
yeah.
No, they didn't submit
It's-
on that. I don't think we reached out to them on it.
Calhoun Burns, Shive.
The project was kind of halfway down the road to begin.
McClure out of Missouri, I think.
But if you want to have a quote unquote city engineer, I mean, that's what I'm talking about here.
Because if it's something they don't handle, they would recommend who.
They would sub it out.
Make a
or they-
recommendation.
they Make a recommendation. I mean, if they were in for all of it as opposed to just a piecemeal thing, they would probably do it. They would have an engineer assigned to us, just like they have an attorney assigned to us, and do it.
Maybe we can get a little more bang for.
But it's like I said before, they're more comprehensive than what you get out of French Record. These guys could do land use planning, for instance. They could help you negotiate some sophisticated subdivisions.
Where are they located at?
Cedar Rapids. Although they have offices in a lot of other places. Is he from Cedar Rapids, Matt?
Yes.
Okay, there's some that'd be from Quad City, some from Des Moines.
Building on the square, I can see another business. Local office.
Local office even.
HRG Bloomfield. Okay,
All right.
You got enough information to move forward with?
yes, sir.
Okay.
All right.
Consider approval of mechanic job description.
We need to have you approve that, and then we'll go into closed session and talk about the compensation for it, with approvals, of the job description. We will then present a tentative agreement to the union tomorrow for them to vote on it and bring back a side letter that would formally approve the creation of the position, with a salary, a week from tonight.
So are they gonna provide their own mechanic tools?
No.
Do we have them now?
We are gonna have to buy some, and we have some. I'll probably buy most of them.
A lot of them type of mechanics have their own.
The issue you get into with that is I had reached out to, of course, I am WCA and our, the lost people and HR. Basically, if you provide the tools, then you gotta have a policy in place. If it's broke, who replaces it, what's gonna go on, and also, so it's just kind of, you gotta get into that process and provide tools.
So we will provide.
But if they own them, they're gonna keep track of them and better care of them than if they own yours. You don't have Joe Blow coming in and borrowing and taking out down the street.
I think
Yep.
most shops,
I wouldn't, I mean,
they own their own tools except for specialty tools.
if you need a computer thing to check diagnostics, yeah, I mean, I can see something like that.
Again, that's just
There
whatever.
are tools.
They need their hand tools, I mean, they're gonna keep them locked, or keep the other guys out of them.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I have, well, that's the other side too. I mean, so, again, yeah, I'm looking at that stuff. But so I have the list of like when you graduate Indian Hills diesel program, this is the tools they come out of there with, I reached out to a friend of mine who works at TMC and Acting, this is the general standard tool list they want you to have to come to work with, so whether we buy them or they provide them, we should probably need to provide a list of what they need to bring. I would say, base set.
I would rather see them bring their own tools, and if they need specialty tools, then we provide that.
Yeah,
So we set the
Like I said, they're gonna take better care of their own tools.
and keep track of them.
They're not gonna go on a shopping spree every other day.
They're gonna keep them locked at the end of the day, and if
Right.
one comes up missing, they're gonna look in everybody's box.
Well, then you'll end up having coffee time with the Snap-on man in the parking lot, cause everybody will be down there buying, getting tools for their own.
So that may, and then, of course, that may just limit who applies for the job too, because if they don't have the tools.
They don't have their own tools.
That might
They
be a
don't want them.
benefit too.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm just, yeah. So it's whatever you guys.
Not much of a ring spinner if they don't have rings.
Well,
Can we do this is see how we go about, see what happens when we get through the process? Whether tool, we'll ask them in the interview process, are you gonna do tools or are you not? I don't know, you're gonna get people with their own tools to come here?
If they don't have their own tools, I'm
Yeah.
not sure you want them.
Okay.
They're not that qualified if they don't have their own tools.
you don't have a box of Snap-on tools
Yeah.
big enough to take care of everything that you're
And
gonna work
and they're
on.
doing this,
You aren't doing it.
you said, was it Inc. you had?
yeah, TMC, pretty much anybody, because if they graduate the program, they already have, basically
Right,
almost 2 tool sets of tools.
Right.
So,
but are they going to work in cities with their own tools?
yeah.
If they want the benefits and the wages.
I have a buddy that just moved from
Yeah.
Chicago back to Des Moines, he had to rent a truck.
Most tools, yeah.
He had a what?
Rent a truck to haul his toolbox. A forklift to load them.
So that's, again,
Sorry.
Qualified mechanic will have his own
Rabbit
tools.
trail, but
we can put that in there. Actually, I think I took it out, so we can put it back in there.
Have their own basic tools, and if there's any specialty tools.
Right, so I think we have probably at least, say, these tools, requirement or minimum at least.
I have no problem with that.
Yeah. So that way we can.
I don't know if I'd have a list for them, they know what they need.
Oh, I think you wanna have a list because then you're gonna know what the specialty tools are and what they're not. That shouldn't be hard to, if these people are equipped, that shouldn't be hard to fill.
You got some schools and stuff that require you to have a tool that you may never ever use for nothing, that they need you to use one time.
Yeah, this is.
let's let it be in flux and get to it, but I think that they ought to provide their own tools.
Yeah.
They'll know what they need, if they need it, they'll buy it.
A recommended list.
Yeah,
And we can have a local mechanic take a look at the list and see if they think that's not interested in the job, so you don't need this.
No, I just want to know.
So I need a motion for that, approval of the,
This,
with the,
this
with that
probably
change.
ought to have a change
With that change.
with the requiring their own.
under the essential job functions, they'll provide their own.
Yeah.
Okay. So with that change, I would make a motion to approve it.
Is there any other discussion? I guess one question I'm gonna ask is, how many of these requirements are they gonna be required to have to be hired?
It's a standard job description for me.
CDL, it's a big.
But we don't always follow the
Yeah,
rules
well-
about the required job skills when we hire people.
I think most of them say preferred, right? With the exception of CDL is required.
The skills and abilities,
Right. So those are, knowledge, skills, and abilities which is.
Required our own specific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Am I right or am I wrong? Is everybody hired under the probationary period to where we assess that they're producing?
And it's 1 year
If
now.
they're not.
New contract is 1 year.
1 year.
Do you know that, Aaron?
Huh?
That there's a year now,
yes.
so that kind of helps, I mean. That's pretty big to me.
You're welcome.
You have a problem with myself or a couple counseling in on the re-interview process if they wanna be?
It's something that we do.
Evidently we do. All in favor?
We're voting on approving this. Or is it not roll call?
No, it's just a simple voice.
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
No, everybody's waiting on it.
I'm getting tired.
We was just having a discussion, we had the
Yeah.
motion in a second.
All right.
Discuss responsibility for repairs to basketball court located beside City Park.
Alright, so that was my deal, so, I got contacted by a gal that said that her son and a couple other guys or young men was interested in fixing up the basketball courts down by the park. And she was asking as far as how she would go about getting funds. The question got brought up of who has responsibility of fixing up the basketball courts / tennis courts. And Sandy done some digging and found some paperwork, that we have, the city has a 99-year lease agreement from the school. I think it dated back 1975 or something. But we are leasing it from the school, so the school actually owns it. And then there's some paperwork in there showing that the city has done repairs on it prior. So it sounds like we're responsible as far as fixing it up, so to say.
Are they gonna try and do some fundraising, or are they just coming to us for fundraising?
Well, I think she just, kind of wanted to get the ball rolling somehow. Like I said, we wanted to get that clarified, who was responsible for fixing it up first.
Past repairs were done through the Parks
Parks and Rec.
So,
Well, I mean, what that means is it still is the city's responsibility.
Depending on ownership, depends on depends on the type of grants you can use for it.
So what all repairs, does it need fence, overlaid, what?
Probably basketball goals and concrete and fence and lights.
That's asphalt, isn't it? Isn't that
It's
asphalt?
not very good shape.
It's
But it's probably
asphalt,
have to have
it needs
asphalt.
backboards, it needs hoops, it needs net.
has anybody walked down there and looked at it?
I have not.
Yeah.
I drove by today.
It's been terrible
If
for
you're gonna,
years.
15 years.
if you're gonna do it, what should be done is paved.
Needs
Concrete.
And
If you're
are
gonna
we
do
gonna eliminate the tennis courts that are there that are horrible at the same time?
I would, just
They're
for the
bad.
fact that the school's got a brand new set of tennis courts that is open to the
I think
public.
that decision, as far as a recommendation is concerned, is how it should be configured is something the Park and Rec Board ought to recommend to you all.
Okay, send it to the Park and Rec Board.
But, we own it. What we own is the facility, we do not own the land, that's. what
We
it
own the
is.
privilege to maintain it.
And after about 50 years, what it really suggests is that it probably just needs to be redone.
Well, Chris, can you maybe dig, see if there's any unique grants out there that
Could be some,
we could get some money for them? I mean, it's cool that the kids wanna put the
Yeah.
effort in.
It isn't a
that'd fall under a well mark,
Yeah, I think there's some opportunities in
well mark or, casino.
Yeah, and so the casino grants they just came out, so it'll be another year for those, but I mean, that would be an easy one. And I think you'd see a lot of support.
Obviously, you're not looking at doing this till summer.
Is there a priority? I mean, we did set aside $25,000 to do some work on the pool. So, I mean, is it pool
Don't
priority
tap
over
into
the,
that.
well, but it hasn't been done, so I'm just saying, is there a priority or is there a choice?
No, I'd say leave
Just
that
asking.
alone.
I mean, I just noticed that.
I tell you how I think
You need another 100 to go with your 25.
I'm just saying, I'm just throwing that out there.
I'll tell you how I think that this is gonna get resolved is that we'll get a cost estimate and then it goes before you guys in the budget time to determine whether in fact you're gonna put it in or not. In the meantime, we'll find out if there's a couple grants or something, but I'm not gonna say that this is a $10,000 or $15,000 project.
I don't know what the dimensions on it are.
Well, let's
Double
go
wide.
on down the road. I mean, This gets so lengthy. Let's get
You're gonna
done
start getting more
tonight.
sleep at night,
Huh?
Ron. You're gonna start getting more sleep at night.
He usually works till this time of night.
So anyway, I'm just saying, you know, I don't wanna not do it, but
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, so we got direction there. We're just gonna go back to Parks and Rec as far as design criteria, and then we'll try and figure out what the cost is.
Maybe Taylor's got a bunch of money she didn't tell us about, she wants to throw at it.
Public comments?
No public.
Well, the only thing I'm just gonna say is, Thursday, at 6, we're gonna have Earl, Scott, we're gonna have another
Please.
sit down with the police department.
Next Thursday at 6.
Before the regular meeting. Okay.
Before the regular meeting. Other than that, have a closed session, pursue Ohio Code 20.173, negotiating session, strategy meetings with public employers,